Hello all. I'm just going to go through a few quick things in Rhino to help you get the most out of these files, as I kind of referenced in the email earlier today. So the first thing to realize, and I'm going to be doing this inside Rhino for Mac, but everything applies for Rhino for PC, it's even easier in some ways, is that no matter what computer you're working on, it should be possible to get really high resolution, beautiful images. My laptop happens to have a retina screen, so as you can see here, it has quite a high resolution. Maybe your viewport, if you have nothing selected, under properties, might have as low as, let's say, 1200 or something like this. That's not. It is critical, shall we say, in terms of how much information is showed and how it looks in terms of preview. But if I go to the 4-up display, so let's say that your display might be at this kind of resolution, a little bit better than that. So, for example, 1200 by 8 or 900. So this could be your display size. Now, obviously, that seems to be a big disadvantage. However, what really matters is if we go to, and I've just realized it's slightly off the screen, but if we go to View, you have to take my word for it, this is the View bar, and go to Capture to File, then you'll see that the default resolution is going to be the size of your viewport, but you can add a multiplier here, so that can also be a fraction, and that can only be a simple fraction. It's okay. And what actually really matters is this resolution here. So that's actually the resolution that's going to save out that particular view at. And don't be conservative here. Often I'll be outputting images of up to 7,000 pixels wide, just because I can have much more control when I downsize, because I'm dealing with points in the end. So make sure you're in pixels here, and then, for example, 6,000 by 4,000 pixels is a good image for print, or even for screen in this case. It's just going to show much sharper, and so on. I'd leave transparent off, actually, especially if anything other than point clouds there, because it'll actually make the point clouds themselves transparent. You'll run into other issues. Later, when you're a power user, perhaps you can start to experiment with it, but it'll cause more problems than it solves in a lot of ways. So what that's going to mean is that your background color, lighting, everything should be set up in your viewport as you would like it to be viewed. And this resolution is important because when we actually start to set up our view, and I'll do that now, so you could go just to display properties. That doesn't exist in Rhino for Mac. It's not in that form. So it's instead going to be under, shall we say, Rhino options, and then under, not document options or document settings, but Rhino settings, there will be display modes tab. And under that, you will have these various display modes. So you have the just standard ones, which are installed with Rhino, and then you can make your own. So you make your own by actually selecting, for example, rendered, or one which more or less matches what you want to do. And on the Mac side, I can say plus, make a copy. On the easy side at the bottom there is the option to make a copy or a clone. So I can then go to the General tab with that selected and change that to my point clouds group 3, for example. And then what I can do, for example, is change the background color to black. I can wait for that ball to stop spinning. I can turn off shadows because I'm using a rendered viewport. And more importantly, under objects, I can change the properties of how points as well as everything else is shown if you do have objects in your scene. So in this case, I'm going to change the default point cloud style to a solid circle. So it's going to be rendered as a true point and not as a pixel or a square. And the important thing then to adapt, and this will really depend on the density of your model, will depend on how close you are to your scene. You'll need to change the size of the points being shown. What this actually means is this is in relation to that previous number which you saw. So it actually, for the render, it doesn't matter how big your viewport is. If you think of this size here, what really matters is the multiplier. And if it's at 6,000 pixels, imagine that means each point is going to be, for example, 3 pixels wide. Just keep that in mind because you might actually have to make a few copies of this. You might have to have a close-up version and a far-away version, and just do a quick test. So in this case, let's just do that. What you can also change is the thickness. The curves are going to be shown if they use their object's color, or if you color all curves red or another color. Let's put that in here. For now, I'm just going to change those settings and accept them. And then, importantly, I'll change to that new viewport setting. So these points suddenly got a little bit bigger. I'm not sure if you noticed that. But now if I go to view, let's say capture define, my multiplier of 3, apply. Keep in mind it's taking the proportions of this viewport. So if you want to make a really wide render, just drag the proportions of that viewport to match. And perhaps even note down the resolution of the proportions so that you can recreate that render again later. And drag it to match the exact number of pixels. So in this case, I'm just going to save this here. Example 1. It's going to save out. There we have an example. So the pixel is definitely round. They're way too big, but because I would usually render at a much bigger resolution, you can kind of get the idea. So they'll be shown in order, which is good, so they'll kind of block each other out, and you'll get the resulting output. The example which I showed in the email was this one. Here you see the difference between a low and a high resolution version. Here I just made, for example, these shapes slightly transparent. You can see that I'm starting to kind of balance the scale of the spacing of the points to the point sizes themselves, and we could actually boost the scale perhaps of these red lines and so on, these yellow markers, whatever they show, I have no idea, and so on, and start to have these infrastructures interact with each other in a more dynamic way. That's group one. So, and here you see the effects on a landscape where just the subtle shifts in topography, where they start to overlap, is a very particular visual effect. And it actually adds almost a texture to a landscape. You can imagine this would be extremely different if it was a smooth surface. It would look like a polygonal model. Good. So let's go back to writing. The other thing to keep in mind about those viewports is you can also import and export them, so you can share them among your group. Keep in mind you're going to have different scaled viewports, but as I mentioned, if your colleague has a very small viewport, then you can just adjust. You can keep the point size the same and adjust your multiplier to make sure you're making the same resolution of image. But keep in mind these settings should be somewhat consistent throughout the group. Here we can import and export these as kind of an INI initiation file. Good. The other thing that I wanted to show as we start to make different kinds of images which start to evoke something in the city. And I was going to use this file over here, but perhaps I'll stick with this one. Is we might want to, for example, make a cutaway section. Now the section planes in Rhino work very simply and relatively well. And I'm going to just show you the easiest way to implement them. So it's called a clipping plane. So always change to a 4-up view with these different views by double-clicking on one of the titles. Type clipping plane, enter. We're going to draw it just to save a step. We're going to draw it straight into a side view so that we know it's already oriented in a certain direction. Okay, again the recording's slowing down my computer a bit, but actually it's still just my Mac laptop, so you can see it can handle this file pretty well. So it's appeared in the middle of the city. And so what you're going to want to do is then, for example, perhaps go to top view. Here's the clipping plane. I'm not sure if you can see it, this yellow line. And the first thing we're going to do, and it's quite important, is going to make a layer which is called clipping plane. Also so that I move object to this layer, so that we can actually find it, that people opening the file realize there's a clipping plane, and so on. There's nothing more frustrating than opening up a file and you can't select objects. The file seems empty, it seems half empty, and it's actually just because there's a clipping plane turned on and you don't realize it's even there. Because we're going to hide it in the end anyway. So what I can then do is I can rotate it into position. The line it's pointing with is what it's going to keep, and everything behind it's going to get rid of. So in this case I'm going to rotate it through the city. It's quite arbitrary, but let's shift it over here so we're cutting through this piece of infrastructure. Good. You're going to set it up in a much more meaningful manner should you be using a clipping plane. So now that I've got it in position, I'm happy with it, I can turn on. If we look at the properties over here with it selected, you've got normal properties also for a clipping plane, but you also have specific clipping plane properties. So in this case, what I can actually do is go straight to perspective and activate it. And what that's done is it's just cropped that particular viewport. I can activate it in more if I want. I can activate it in top as well. But the good thing is that it's not actually linked to the camera at all. So I can now rotate the camera around, and it's going to, and I can actually take full advantage of that. So those kind of characteristics, should we say. Just going to go full screen. And now that I'm happy with its position, let's say I've played with it enough, I'm just going to hide that layer so that it just hides the plane, but it's still active. Just keep that in mind. So this is how you're going to be able to reveal tunnels, show the relationship to the surface, even annotate them, and so on. Show how they interact with water surfaces, with other infrastructures, and so on. And just remember, when you're done, label it with your name or whatever else, or what you're trying to show, and then perhaps even then it may not show up in the viewport you're in, so you might have to go into a different viewport to select it, and then perhaps you can disable it before you save the file, just so that you're really kind of in control. Great. So that's all I'm just gonna leave it there for now. And feel free to email me if there are specific questions which you'd like to deal with. We can get some pretty incredible images straight out of Rhino. And for now, I would say I'll leave it up to you whether or not you leave your objects as surfaces. If you find that's working, just make them slightly transparent. We can always turn them into point clouds later. And perhaps in some cases, a little bit of color for the different infrastructure is actually going to help you kind of activate the city, especially given that it has this kind of black and white context. Okay, thanks guys, and really looking forward to what you're coming up with and discovering. Thanks.